Hello, friends. Welcome to this presentation on the 2030 Agenda of the United Nations, an attack on life and family. My name is Adolfo Castañeda. I am the Director of Hispanic Education for Human Life International. My colleague, Dr. Felipe Vizcarrondo, is not going to be with us today. He's going to be with us in a further presentation down the line. What is the 2030 Agenda? The 2030 Agenda is a plan of action of the United Nations and other anti-life and globalist organizations. It consists of 17 what they call Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, and 169 targets distributed among those SDGs. It was adopted by the UN and its collaborators, et al., collaborators, in 2015 to be met by 2030 by the whole world. The overall objective, according to them, is to create a world sustainable for all. We'll explain what sustainable means in a few minutes. They want to, so they say, eradicate poverty, protect the planet, and prosperity for all. The main topics are really all the major topics of society: economy, health, education, gender, mitigation of climate change, etc. What is really their hidden agenda? They really want to impose a one world government that is called globalism. They want to establish and control an anti-life and anti-family so-called culture. For example, besides abortion, the LGBT ideology, which we all know what it is. They want to limit political, economic, and social liberties of individuals and nations so they can then impose their agendas. They want to limit technological and economic growth to so-called mitigate climate change. That is the meaning of sustainable development. In other words, what they are proposing is that technology and economic growth should grow as far as the environment is concerned, so as not to damage the environment. So they want to limit the technological and economic growth to only what they call green energy, and not energy coming from fossil fuels. They want to eliminate fossil fuels. This is a topic that we'll be dealing with over and over again in this presentation. They are wrong about the fossil fuels. As we will see in another presentation, we're going to discuss more about this issue of climate change, which is a hoax, as we shall see. But for the moment, we are saying that it is an error to limit energy to only so-called green energy and to take away energy coming from fossil fuel sources such as natural gas, carbon, petroleum, and good use of atomic energy. They want also to control education and the media, especially education, to pervert the hearts of our children and youth by means of so-called sex education, immoral sex education that promotes abortion, contraception, etc. They also want to control population control through abortion, contraception, sterilization, and euthanasia. What are some of the antecedents of the 2030 Agenda? There are several. The first one is the Cairo Conference in 1994. This is a conference, an international conference, supposedly based on development and population, where the United Nations tried to impose abortion as an international right under the guise of reproductive health. They were not able to do so, but they opened the door for further legalization of abortion down the line. Even though in the final document of this conference, the definition of reproductive health did not include abortion, they did include family planning, which includes abortifacient contraceptives. In other words, they did not include conventional abortion, that is to say surgical abortion or abortion by 100% abortifacient pills, such as mifepristone, but they did include abortifacient contraceptives. The other antecedent next to it was the Beijing Conference on Women in 1995, where the United Nations adopted the term gender equality applied to women. This is a good thing to respect the rights of women. The problem is that the UN used this terminology, gender, to later expand it into the LGBT ideology, lesbianism, homosexuality, bisexualism, and transgenderism, which is horrible. What are some of the antecedents of the 2030 Agenda? We continue with those antecedents, and we have the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, which were adopted in 2000 to be achieved by 2015. And there were the following 8: eradicate poverty and hunger. This is really the tactic of inclusion, which means that you combat bad things. I mean, you do good things, such as eradicate poverty and hunger, but you include in it population control through abortion and contraception. The second one was universal primary education. This is a good thing, but they used that to impose a sex education, their immoral sex education that perverts the minds or hearts of minors, youth, and teens. The third one was gender equality and empowerment. Every time you see the word empowerment of women and girls, this is a code word for abortion and contraception. The fourth one was reduce infant mortality. They want to reduce infant mortality by promoting abortion and contraception, which is outrageous. Fifth one, they want to improve maternal health, again, by including in it abortion and contraception. Sixth one, combat HIV and AIDS. They want to use this to impose sex education and condoms, which really do not solve the problem, but make it worse. The seventh one was a sustainable environment. They want to sustain the environment by imposing population control because they blame people and they say that we are predators of the environment. And the last one, number 8, was to create a World Association for Development. This is not nothing else but globalism, a one world government imposed by the UN and their allies. Continuing with the same topic of antecedents and the same topic of Millennium Development Goals, we have that the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, failed. They were not achieved. So what the UN did, they created a new agenda, the 2030 Agenda, which they created in 2015 to be fulfilled by 2030. This is really a globalist and anti-life strategy. First, you create an agenda, a global agenda, then you know that it fails. Once it fails, you create a new agenda, and then you ask for more money and more control. It is really a strategy. Continuing with the antecedent, the last antecedent of the 2030 Agenda we'll discuss is the Earth Summit, or Rio Plus 20, which was carried out in 2012. It was all about climate change, saying that it's one of the greatest challenges and that it must be addressed by means of a global governance. They claim that we must reduce global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and that fossil fuels are the ones that cause climate change. This is not true, as we shall show in another presentation later on. But we have plenty of proof that this issue about climate change is a false one. They included in practically all the Sustainable Development Goals this idea about climate change, as we shall see promptly, especially number 13 of the Sustainable Development Goals. It also promoted this summit, this Rio Plus 20, reproductive health and empowerment of women, which is really abortion. And it was included in the SDG number 5, as we shall see. It also launched the idea of new goals based on the Millennium Goals. And those were, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals adopted by the UN 3 years later in 2015. Let's give a summary of the 2030 Agenda before we actually analyze briefly each of the 17 goals, because we're going to see that these issues are going to repeat themselves over and over again in the different goals. First of all, you have worldwide abortion disguised as reproductive health and empowerment of women and girls. Secondly, you have population control, especially of poor countries. Third, you have the danger of climate change, the so-called danger of climate change, to justify population control. Then you have the LGBT agenda, and this is also in all the SDGs practically, with the pretext of non-discrimination and inclusion. We should not discriminate or do violence to any person whatsoever, but they are using this issue in order to promote their LGBT agenda. Next, we have sex education, which is really an immoral sex education to change the minds of new generations to accept the whole entire 2030 agenda. Now we're going to see briefly in the summary fashion the 17 goals, and then we're going to briefly analyze each one of them. This is how they have it in the website. First, SDG, no poverty. Number 2, zero hunger. Number 3, good health and well-being. Number 4, quality education. Number 5, gender equality. Number 6, clean water and sanitation. Number 7, affordable and clean energy. Number 8, decent work and economic growth for all. Number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Number 10, reduced inequalities. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Number 12, responsible consumption and production. Number 13, climate action for climate change. Number 14, life below water. Number 15, life on land. Number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And number 17, partnership for the goals. As you can see, all these goals look very beautiful and good and attractive, and they cover everything in the air, on the earth, and above the water, and below the water. Everything. And everything is great. It's going to be a paradise on earth. But all of this is false. Behind this beautiful language is uncovered an anti-life, anti-family agenda, as we will see now. First, sustainable development goal, no poverty. What you see there, if you're looking at the slides, is that I have in brown letter, I have what they say, a brief summary of what they say about this sustainable development goal, and then in red, what the real agenda is. They say, so they claim, help the poor face extreme climate phenomena. Well, yeah, they want that by eliminating the poor through population control. Then they claim that they want international norms to help the poor to include gender. What does gender have to do with facing poverty? Well, what they really want to do is to promote the whole LGBT ideology among the poor, especially the young in poor countries. Second sustainable goal, zero hunger. They claim that climate change has caused food scarcity, high prices, and hunger. This is not true. Climate change has not caused these things, but injustice, bad governmental policies, and socialism, when the government has control of the economy. Instead of having free market economy with social justice, of course, for people disadvantaged, they want to have the government to control the economy. That's socialism, and the church has condemned socialism as well as the natural law has condemned it. They claim that they want to people to adapt to climate change and extreme weather phenomena. Again, what they really want is to spread population control to so-called mitigate climate change. Sustainable goal number 3, good health and well-being. They claim that in 2020, 800 women died daily from pregnancy and childbirth. This might be true, but the answer is not abortion as they claim, but good medical care. And notice that they blame only pregnancy and childbirth for death of women instead of blaming abortion, which kills women also, besides unborn babies. So the whole thing is not true. I want to say that we're not here to condemn any woman or person who, in one way or another, has involved himself or herself in abortion. We want for them to repent and receive the forgiveness and mercy of God. We're condemning abortion and the evil it is, but not people. People were calling to repentance and conversion and healing. So I want to make that clear. Going back to what they claim with this number 3 Sustainable Development Goal, they want to reduce worldwide maternal mortality rates. Again, good, but not through abortion, as they claim, and contraception, but through good medical care. They want to end AIDS. That is very good, but not through condoms, but through chastity education. Condoms do not work, they fail, and they promote promiscuity, which increases the risk of contracting any type of sexually transmitted disease, including AIDS. They claim that they want reproductive and sexual health and sex education in national programs. Really what they mean by reproductive and sexual health is abortion and contraception, and they want these to be promoted to children through sex education. They claim that they want universal health care with safe vaccines, but we know that many of the vaccines, especially in the COVID pandemic, were made with aborted babies, with cell lines from aborted babies. And they also cause health problems, as we all know about. Sustainable Development Goal number 4, quality education. They want to eliminate disparity through gender disparity through education. Again, more pro-abortion, contraception, and LGBT ideology through sex education. They want they claim that students must learn sustainable development, gender equality, and global citizenry. But what they want is to brainwash children and teens, etc., young people, with climate change ideology, LGBT ideology, and globalism, one world government controlled by them. They claim that they want education settings that take gender differences into account. Again, more brainwashing of children with LGBT ideology. Sustainable Goal number 5, gender equality. Notice that now we are dealing with an SDG called gender equality, but we have seen that in the 4 previous Sustainable Development Goals, MDGs, gender was included. So really the gender ideology is practically included in all the Sustainable Development Goals, although they have this one specifically dedicated to gender equality. Gender equality, they claim, is a fundamental human right, essential for a sustainable world. But what they really mean is they're using the violence that is sometimes perpetrated against trans people, which is wrong, as an excuse to impose LGBT ideology. They're very clever and astute. This is what they want. They claim that they want to end discrimination against women and girls, which is something that is very good. But again, they want to use the violence and discrimination that is perpetrated sometimes against females to impose abortion and the whole gender ideology and the whole population control ideology. They claim that they want sexual and reproductive rights according to the Cairo and Beijing conferences that I mentioned before. But again, we saw that in these conferences, they wanted to promote abortion and contraception under the guise of reproductive health and empowerment of women. They claim that they want policies and laws to promote gender equality and women empowerment. Again, what they really mean is to impose abortion legalization through so-called women empowerment in pro-life poor countries that do not want this in their countries. Sustainable Development number 6, clean water and sanitation. Excellent. We all want that. They claim that rapid population growth causes an increase on water on demand. There is no rapid population growth. This is not true. This is an excuse to justify population control. There is no overpopulation. And in fact, there is a danger of an implosion of population, an aging of population in many countries. We're going to address that topic more fully in another presentation. They claim that a greater scarcity of food and water pollution causes climate change. But there is no evidence of a supposed climate change, and we shall prove in another presentation. They want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius as proposed in the Rio Plus 20 conference, and they claim that that will reduce water scarcity. This is not true. There is no global warming that constitutes an environmental problem. This is false. They claim that the UNESCO 2030 report said that there is an imminent risk of global water crisis. Let me tell you, UNESCO, which is the fund of the United Nations for science, culture, and education, has no credibility whatsoever. They promote abortion and sex education in their programs, so we should not believe anything they say. Sustainable Development Goal number 7, SDG number 7, affordable and clean energy. They claim that 2,000 million people use contaminating fuels and technology to cook. That is not true. It is not true that fossil fuels like gas, like people use for cooking, when used correctly, cause climate change. They want to eliminate all the energy that coming from fossil fuels, which is crazy, it's insanity. They claim that companies must obtain 100% of electricity from renewable energy sources. These renewable energy sources or green sources are solar panels, windmills, and others, but not fossil fuels. Again, in another presentation, we shall prove that these sources cause many problems. They are problematic and they cause poverty because they're very expensive. They claim that we must increase our international collaboration to invest in clean energy. This is globalism, to impose as a solution the use of only so-called green energy. Sustainable Development number 8, decent work and economic growth for all. They claim that we need to invest more in sustainable and inclusive economic growth. But more money for economic growth with only green energy and with gender, that's what they really want. Countries, they claim, with sustainable economies will employ more youth and empower women. This is false. Green energy will only cause poverty because it's expensive and it causes a downgrade in electricity in the electrical grid of the countries. It is already causing problems of lack of energy to combat cold weather or very hot weather, and people have already died because of that. On the other hand, also empowering women, as we already mentioned, means abortion. They claim that economic growth must not degrade the environment according to the conference of Rio Plus 20. But again, Rio Plus 20 has zero credibility. It promoted the false ideology of climate change and population control in disguise. Sustainable Development Goal number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. They claim that action to mitigate climate change depends greatly in a sustainable industry development. What they really want is to force companies to use only green energy to so-called mitigate so-called climate change. They claim that they must help poor countries to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, CO2 emissions. But this is false. CO2 emissions pose no problem. It is false to claim otherwise. Green energy will only impoverish the poor more. They claim that we must collaborate with NGOs and governments to for sustainable growth in poor countries. But the NGOs they are promoting are the same anti-life groups that are friends and collaborators with the United Nations that influence government. For example, we have the affiliates of the International Planned Parenthood Federation. The International Planned Parenthood Federation is the largest abortion provider in the world, and its many affiliates, they have affiliates in every country of the world, are the ones who mainly participate in UN conferences, which have the green light to participate, while pro-life organizations are sometimes blocked from participating in such conferences. So this is really not a democratic process in which different organizations participate in the UNA forums. This is false from the UN. They claim that we must use social media to pressure politicians to give priority to the Sustainable Development Goals. In other words, they want to force government to impose their anti-life 2030 agenda, which they themselves created and that nobody chose, and they want to impose it on the whole world, undemocratically. Sustainable Development Goal number 10, reduce inequalities. They claim that income, race, sexual orientation, which is a core word for homosexuality, etc., inequalities continues worldwide. What they really want to do is to promote homosexuality by putting it on the same level as race, as religion, as income, as other good things that are good in themselves. They want to adopt measures against all kinds of discriminatory practices and hate speech. What they really mean by hate speech is pro-life and pro-family positions that they want to shut down and avoid to participate in their conferences. They claim that all democracies continue to face racism, homophobia, and transphobia. What they really mean by homophobia, the real meaning of this word, and transphobia mean an irrational fear of homosexuality and transgenderism. But we don't have an irrational fear. This is not true of these things. We have a rational concern because these things are bad. We want to help these people that suffer from homosexuality and transgenderism with real psychological help and not by spreading these things. Homophobia, etc., are not at the same level as race, religion, or income. The homophobia and transphobia are immoral activities, and we should help these people overcome this situation and not use them in order to promote an agenda. Sustainable Development Goal number 11, sustainable cities and communities. They claim that uncontrolled urban growth causes CO2 emissions that in turn cause climate change. False. Besides, they want to be the ones who control urban growth. It is false that CO2 emissions cause climate change. This is false, but they also want to control the who gets into the cities and who doesn't. They claim that urban energy consumption and pollution are some of the principal challenges. They continue with a false mantra and narrative against energy from fossil fuels. They claim that we must reduce urban per capita negative impacts on the environment. This is outrageous. They are claiming that each individual causes environmental damage by simply breathing and other things, and that this causes CO2 emissions that cause climate change. This is all false. Sustainable Development number 12, responsible consumption and production. They claim that the planet is running out of resources, but the world population continues to grow. This is a double lie. This is false. There are sufficient resources, and it is not true that there will be an overpopulation. In fact, the opposite is true. The population of the world, in most of the world, is suffering from an implosion. In other words, from underpopulation, from low fertility rates that are causing the danger of aging populations with all these socioeconomical problems that this brings about. They claim that we need 3 planets to provide natural resources to keep up present lifestyles. This is totally ridiculous and false. And whose present lifestyles are they talking about? Those of themselves, of the UN et al., that is to say their collaborators, that are elitists? This is false. They claim they must replace fossil fuels with green energy, but money for the former, for fossil fuels, is increasing. They're complaining about that. Again, the false narrative of green energy. It will cause high prices, poverty, and problems, and we shall see more and more detail in a future presentation. They claim that the last century economic growth has caused economic degradation, and survival of the world is in danger. This is totally false. Economic growth, thanks to free markets and charity, Christian charity, has pulled many out of poverty. It is true that sometimes social injustice and economic injustice is committed, and we need to correct those things, and we're ready to correct them. But we should not blame free markets in themselves to be the cause of the problem. In fact, they are the solutions when done correctly. Sustainable Development number 13, climate action. Notice that this is the goal that is concretely dedicated to climate action to fight so-called climate change. But notice that the previous 12 Sustainable Development Goals, somehow the idea, the ideology of climate change has been present. So really, we see that gender ideology and climate change ideology is really present in all the 17 goals. I know that this is tiresome and repetitive, but this is the way that they are pushing all these things. So I'm sorry if I'm being repetitive, but that is the UN who's being repetitive, because we repeat over and over again the same false ideas. They claim that a climate cataclysm is near and that we're not prepared, that time is running out and that we must act now. This is a false apocalyptic prediction to scare people into compliance, into acceptance of the 2030 agenda. They claim that this cataclysm is caused by human activity, causing CO2 emissions and global warming. False. CO2 is good and necessary for plants to be green, for plants to really produce fruits, and in fact to save water. CO2 is good for plants, and the level of CO2 right now poses no problem globally. Global warming, again, is false. It's a false ideology. There is not a global warming that causes a problem globally. There is a cyclical thing that is not caused by human activity, but is caused by certain changes in the sun and other factors that we shall explain in another presentation. They claim that the international community refuses the necessary commitment. What really is happening here is that they have the audacity of blaming people for the false agenda they themselves created and they want to impose. They claim that the 2015 Paris Accord on climate change was an important step forward, but that we need more money and action. That accord wanted to eliminate fossil fuels, which is ridiculous and dangerous and false. And also, even though the 2015 Paris Accord did not explicitly talk about abortion, they did talk about women empowerment, which in the language of the UN, which the accord accepted, means abortion. So the 2015 Paris Accord is pushing for population control through abortion. It's a bad accord and we should not accept it. Finally, they claim in this number 13 SDG that all must recognize the UN Convention on Climate Change. What this really means is that the UN wants absolute control of everything. Sustainable Development Goal number 14, life below water. Oceans, they claim, absorb greatest quantity of CO2 caused by human activity on Earth. This is false. Human activity does not cause an excess of CO2. They claim that submarine pollution is reaching extreme levels. This is an exaggeration, but it's true that we must take off the oceans. For example, we shouldn't dump on the ocean plastic. That is true. But they claim that plastic in themselves are bad. That is not true. What is bad is not recycling them or dumping it on the water. That is what is really bad, not the plastic itself. They also claim that this pollution threatens ecosystems and destroys coral reefs all over the world. This is totally false. A recent study showed that there is no destruction whatsoever of worldwide coral reefs. This is a recent study that came out. They also are saying that we must regulate fishing exploitation and access. And they claim that the UN Convention on Ocean Rights must be put into place. Again, the UN wants to control fishing and ocean use. They want to define what is fishing exploitation. And we ask ourselves, where are the poor who fish are going to live on? Who decides what is fishing exploitation and what is not? They want to control it. Should we trust the UN? No, we should not. SDG number 15, life on land. You see, we have talked about life on the air, life on the ocean, life below the ocean, now life on land. They want to control the whole thing, the whole world. They're saying that agricultural expansion, listen to this, causes close to 90% of global deforestation and loss of biodiversity. This is false. They're blaming agricultural growth. But who defines what is excessive agriculture? They define it? Shall we trust them? No, we should not. And how can poor people live without agriculture? They also are saying that forest and soil degradation intensifies the effects of climate change. They continue with a false narrative of climate change. They also are saying that more demand of meat, agricultural expansion, exploitation of wild animals, and climate change cause animal to human illnesses like COVID. This is falsely blaming meat consumption, hunting, and agriculture. How can poor people live if these things are curtailed? And they continue with the false and discredited narrative that the origin of COVID was from animals to people. This has already been debunked. It has already been refuted. They forget that it has been discovered that it arose in a Chinese lab. But they continue with this false narrative. They haven't taken this number 15 SDG out of their websites that have this lie in it. SDG number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. It sounds very good, but it's all false. They claim that all should live without fear of violence irrespective of race, religion, or sexual orientation. Again, they're promoting homosexuality, appealing to violence, and putting homosexuality at the same level as race and religion and other good things. They want to expand participation of poor countries in institutions of global governments. What they really want is to impose globalism on the poor. And there is a big hypocrisy here on the part of the UN, because the tyrannical Chinese Communist Party is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. How can you have peace, justice, and strong democratic institutions if you have a communist tyranny on your UN Security Council and a permanent member at that? This is really bad. And I take this personally because I come from a communist country, Cuba. I was born in Cuba. I have to flee my country because of communism. And Cuba is a member of the UN, as if it were a democratic country, which it is not. So it's a big hypocrisy and double-mindedness on the part of the UN here. And lastly, SDG number 17, partnerships for the goals. They want international partnerships. They want the Sustainable Development Goals. They claim that they can only be achieved with solid global partnerships. This is camouflage promotion of globalism. The SDGs, they claim, have received a weak support, and challenges and lack of funding continue. They are blaming this lack of funding of the goals not being achieved. In other words, they want more control and more money and less or no opposition to their plans. They claim also that the resurgence of nationalisms makes cooperation difficult. They are blaming individual countries for not cooperating in their goals. But this is false. Being a patriot, loving your country, has nothing to do with the false nationalism. Because if you are a true patriot, you love your country, you want your country the best for your country, and you want your country to have good relationships with other countries, economic relations, political relationships, honest relationships. This is just an excuse on the part of the UN to promote globalism. They also are saying that the UN Political High-Level Forum for Sustainable Development will evaluate countries. Again, they want control, and they have the audacity of controlling how countries meet their agenda, the agenda they themselves invented, and they want to impose on countries. This is nothing else but more globalism. And with that, dear friends, we finish this presentation about really what is behind the UN 2030 agenda. It's an attack, a global attack, a very shrewd and astute attack on life and family. We should oppose this agenda, of course, by persuasion and education and information, as we're doing now. If you look at the last slide here, you have in front of you, you're looking at our contact info. If you want to know more about Vida Humana Internacional, the Hispanic division of Human Life International, You see our address there, our phone number, and we also welcome you to visit our YouTube channel, Vida Humana Miami playlist. We have Spanish and English videos that summarize our training course, which we invite you to take. The course is in both English and Spanish, if you want to take it. If you want to visit our Spanish website, it is right there in front of you in our contact info slide, vidahumana.org, and my email address is adolfo@vidahumana.org. We also, of course, have the HLI English website, as you see at the bottom, the right-hand corner, www.hli.org. That is filled with free information, very good information, just as the Spanish one is. Would be benefit you in your process of becoming more and more informed about pro-life issues. Well, dear friends, I wish you the blessing of God. I thank you for your attention and this important information, and we invite you to contact us if you so desire to obtain more information. So God bless you all. Have a good day, and goodbye.